Not only did Carter serve on Habitat for Humanity's board after his presidency, he and his wife Rosalind rolled up their sleeves and built houses, helping more than 4,000 families have a roof over their heads in over a dozen countries. Mark Twain Area Habitat for Humanity's chairman says the organization blew up thanks to Carter's involvement and bringing publicity to the nonprofit. He says their branch has helped about a dozen residents build houses from scratch and become functioning homeowners.
The goal of Habitat, which is to provide low-income housing and provide it for individuals that have need, was something that just fit within the character of who they are and what they are.
Carter also visited Hannibal during his presidency on a different mission. And coming up in the next hour, hear from a Hannibal resident who met Carter face-to-face and gave him a tour of America's hometown. Daniel?
All right, thank you, Claire. The former president also made a special stop in Quincy on his way to Hannibal. The former president will make one final trip to Washington to lay in state at the Capitol.